The alarm clock rang at 6:30 in the morning in a small house on Maple Street. Martha Coleman opened her eyes and immediately heard her husband's discontented grumbling. "That damn sound again," Derek muttered without turning to his wife. "Can't you turn it down?" Martha quickly turned off the alarm clock and carefully got out of bed, trying not to creak the mattress. At 42, she had long been accustomed to starting her day with apologies. Her full body moved slowly and uncertainly, as if she were constantly expecting another remark. "I'm sorry, Derek. I forgot to turn down the volume." Derek Coleman sat on the edge of the bed and rubbed his face with his hands. At 45, he still had an athletic build and took good care of himself. His dark hair was neatly combed even after sleep, and an expensive watch lay on the nightstand, his only weakness and source of pride. "You know I have an important meeting with a client today," he said, getting up and heading for the window. "And you wake me up like there's a fire. How am I supposed to look fresh now?" Martha lowered her head and hurried to the kitchen. In 20 years of marriage, she had learned not to argue in the morning. Derek worked as a salesman at Honest Dave's car dealership and took pride in his sales. He often said that appearance and mood were half the battle in his line of work. While the coffee was brewing, Martha opened the refrigerator and took out some yogurt. A small serving helped her calm down and focus on the day ahead. Food had always been her way of coping with morning stress. There was nothing wrong with a couple of spoonfuls of yogurt before breakfast. Derek came down to the kitchen already dressed in his usual work suit. He looked critically at his wife, who was standing at the stove in an old robe. "You've gained weight again," he stated, as he poured himself a cup of coffee. "Yesterday I saw Mrs. Harris from next door doing yoga in her yard. At her age, looking like she does takes work." Martha pursed her lips and put the bacon in the pan. Jessica Harris was her only friend in the neighborhood, although Martha had been trying to avoid getting too close to her lately. "She's a teacher. She has more time for herself," Martha replied quietly. "Time?" Derek laughed. "Don't you have time to eat less? You work as a cashier in a supermarket. You don't carry bags of cement." Martha fried the eggs and served breakfast to her husband. She herself ate only a piece of toast with butter, but Derek didn't approve of that either. "You can't even stop in the morning," he shook his head. "And then you wonder why your dresses don't fit." After Derek left for work, Martha felt a familiar sense of relief. The house was filled with silence, and she could finally relax. She finished the leftover bacon from the pan and drank another cup of coffee with cream. It helped her get in the mood for the workday. The Fresh Mart supermarket was a 10-minute drive from her house. Martha had been working there for 8 years and knew all the regular customers. Manager Tom Baker was always kind to his employees and never raised his voice. "Good morning, Martha," Tom greeted her as she walked to her cash register. "How are things at home?" "Everything's fine, thank you," she replied automatically, turning on the machine. The day passed in the usual routine. Martha served customers, smiled, and wished them a good day. During her lunch break, she bought a sandwich and a bag of chips at the store's cafeteria. The food helped her relax and take her mind off what was waiting for her at home. Mrs. Johnson, an elderly regular customer, stopped at her checkout counter toward the end of the day. "Honey, you look tired," she said as she sorted through her groceries. "How's the family?" "Everything's fine," Martha replied quickly as she scanned the items. "Derek works a lot, but we're managing." Mrs. Johnson nodded, but a flicker of concern crossed her eyes. She was one of those older women who noticed details and remembered when Martha had been more open and cheerful. That evening, Martha returned home and immediately began preparing dinner. Derek loved meat and potatoes, and she tried to cater to his tastes. While the beef was simmering, she ate a few crackers with cheese. Cooking always made her hungry. Derek came home in a bad mood. An important deal had fallen through, and the customer had bought a car from the competition. "I wasted the whole day on that idiot," he grumbled as he sat down at the table. "And he went to Johnny at Prime Motors. Says he liked the service better there." Martha set a plate in front of him and sat down across from him with a smaller portion. "Maybe tomorrow will be better," she said cautiously. "Tomorrow?" Derek looked at her with irritation. Do you understand how much I lost on that deal? And you sit there and chew as usual. When was the last time I saw you worry about our finances? I do worry, Martha replied quietly. I just don't know how to help. You can start by spending less on food, Derek snapped. Look at yourself in the mirror. Do you think it's pleasant to come home and see a wife who looks like a cow? Martha lowered her eyes to her plate. Her husband's words hurt, but she was used to these kinds of conversations. After dinner, she cleared the table and washed the dishes, while Derek went to watch TV. Around 10 o'clock in the evening, Jessica Harris knocked on the door. Martha hesitated before opening it. Hi, neighbor, Jessica smiled. She was 35, worked as an elementary school teacher, and always looked fresh and energetic. I baked an apple pie and thought you and Derek might like to try it. That's very kind of you, Martha replied, accepting the box. But we shouldn't. Nonsense, Jessica interrupted. How are you? We haven't really talked in a while. Derek's loud laughter came from the living room. He was watching a comedy show. We're fine, Martha said. We've just been really busy. Jessica noticed Martha shifting nervously from foot to foot and glancing toward the living room. Maybe we could get coffee sometime, she suggested. This weekend? Or go see a new movie? I don't know, Martha hesitated. Derek might have plans. Martha, what's going on? Jessica asked quietly. You've changed. We used to talk a lot. Nothing's going on, Martha replied quickly. I'm just tired from work. Sorry, Jess, but I have to get up early tomorrow. Jessica nodded, but her face showed concern. Okay, but if you need anything, I'm here. You know that, right? After Jessica left, Martha closed the door and leaned against it. The pie smelled delicious, and she cut herself a small piece right there in the kitchen. The sweetness helped calm her after the awkward conversation. Derek didn't get up from the couch when she walked past the living room. What did the neighbor want? He asked, without looking up from the screen. She brought a pie. That teacher is playing the saint again, he grumbled. She doesn't have a family of her own, so she meddles in other people's business. Martha didn't answer and went up to her bedroom. Before going to sleep, she ate another piece of pie. It was really delicious, and after a difficult day, she deserved a little treat. Tuesday began as usual. Martha woke up to the alarm clock and immediately heard Derek grumbling that she was making noise like an elephant again. After eating toast with butter while her husband got ready for work, she felt the usual relief when the door closed behind him. At Fresh Mart supermarket, the day promised to be busy. Tuesday was always one of the busiest days. Pensioners came to do their shopping after the weekend, and working people replenished their supplies for the middle of the week. Tom Baker walked past the cash registers, checking how things were going. The manager was 55 years old, and in his 20 years in retail, he had learned to notice details in his employees' behavior. Martha was always punctual and polite to customers, but in recent months, Tom had begun to notice some peculiarities. Good morning, Martha, he greeted her, stopping at her register. Morning, Mr. Baker, she smiled, ringing up an elderly woman's purchases. Tom noticed that there was a half-eaten cinnamon roll next to the register. Martha had apparently bought it before her shift started and was snacking on it between customers. This was not against the rules. Employees were allowed to eat at their workstations as long as it did not interfere with customer service. Closer to lunchtime, Tom walked by again and noticed that Martha had opened a bag of nuts. She was eating them slowly, one at a time, clearly enjoying the process. When customers approached the register, she would put the bag away, and in her spare moments, she would take it out again. Martha is doing great, Tom thought to himself. Maybe she has a problem with her blood sugar? Some people need to eat small amounts frequently. He wasn't going to make an issue of it. Martha was one of the best cashiers, neat, honest, and loved by customers. If she needed to snack to keep her energy up, then let her snack. Martha herself saw nothing unusual in her habits. When the line got long and customers started to get nervous, A few nuts helped her stay calm and keep smiling. When difficult customers came in and argued about prices or returns, a piece of chocolate calmed her nerves. It's normal, she thought, taking an apple out of her bag during a short break between customer traffic. Everyone eats at work, and I'm not overeating, I'm just keeping my strength up. During her lunch break, Martha went to the store's cafeteria. She bought a Caesar salad and a Diet Cola, trying to eat healthy as the magazines advised. But she added a pack of crackers and a piece of cheesecake to her salad, just so she wouldn't feel hungry until the end of her shift. Salad is the basis, she explained to herself, and the rest is just a supplement. Derek always says that a woman should take care of herself, so that's what I'm doing. The second half of the day passed quietly. Martha served several dozen customers, helped an elderly woman figure out her coupons, and even received a compliment from a regular customer for her patience and kindness. Around 4 o'clock, she felt tired and took a banana out of her bag. The fruit gave her energy and lifted her spirits. As she slowly ate it, Mrs. Johnson approached the cash register. "Dear, how are you?" asked the elderly woman, laying out her purchases. "Everything's fine, Mrs. Johnson. How are your grandchildren?" "They're growing fast. How are you? Is Derek still working at the car dealership?" Martha nodded as she scanned the items. The mention of her husband made her tense up a little. "Yes, he's very busy. Lots of customers." Mrs. Johnson noticed the change in Martha's expression when she talked about her husband, but she didn't say anything. At her age, people learned not to pry into other people's family affairs without invitation. By the end of her shift, Martha felt quite satisfied. The workday had gone well, without conflicts or stress, but the thought of going home made her nervous. Derek had seemed particularly tense that morning because of an important meeting with a client. On her way home, she stopped at a small cafe called Molly's and bought a coffee and a pastry. The sweet treat helped her relax before her evening duties, cooking dinner and dealing with her husband's possible nitpicking. At home, Martha immediately realized that Derek had had a bad day. He was sitting on the couch with a can of beer, staring gloomily at the TV. His suit was wrinkled, and his tie was lying on the coffee table. "Hi," she said cautiously. "Hi," he muttered without turning around. Martha went into the kitchen and started getting the ingredients for dinner. She planned to make roast chicken with mashed potatoes, Derek's favorite dish. While the pan was heating up, she ate a few grapes from the refrigerator. Cooking always whetted her appetite. Half an hour later, Derek came into the kitchen. His face was grim. "I lost my biggest deal in 3 months today," he said, opening another can of beer. Martha turned away from the stove where the chicken was frying. "What happened?" she asked. "What happened?" Derek laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. "I've been working with this client for 3 weeks. A married couple, they wanted to buy a new SUV for $45,000. They were supposed to sign the contract today." He took a big gulp of beer and continued. "They came with their kids. 2 little monsters were running around the dealership, and instead of buying, the parents started haggling over every little thing. In the end, they went to the competition, saying they had a more family-friendly atmosphere." Martha nodded sympathetically and put the potatoes in boiling water. "Maybe new customers will show up tomorrow?" she suggested. Derek slammed the can down on the table. "Tomorrow? Do you understand what I lost today? The commission on that deal was $1,500. That's half your monthly salary as a cashier." His tone was becoming increasingly aggressive, and Martha felt a familiar uneasiness in her stomach. "I know it's important," she said quietly. "You know?" Derek stood up and moved closer to her. "What do you know about what it's like to earn real money? You stand behind the register and ring up other people's purchases. No responsibility, no stress." Martha continued stirring the potatoes, trying not to meet his gaze. "You didn't even ask how my day was when I got home," Derek continued. "You just ran to the kitchen to eat something, like always." "I'm making dinner," she retorted. "Making dinner?" He noticed the empty grape box on the table. "Or have you already started eating without me? Can't you even wait an hour until dinner?" Martha blushed. The grapes were such a small thing that she didn't even think of it as food. It was just a couple of berries. A couple of berries, Derek mimicked. And what did you eat at work before that? Do you think I don't know you're always munching on something? Mr. Thompson from the office next door came into our car dealership and saw you through the shop window. He says you're never seen with your hands empty. Her husband's words hurt deeply. Martha didn't know that strangers were watching her. I'm just keeping my energy up while I work, she said. A lot of people do that. A lot of people? Derek laughed. Do many people look like you? Look at yourself, Martha. When was the last time you fit into jeans without an elastic waistband? Martha felt a lump rise in her throat. Criticism of her weight always upset her the most. I try to take care of myself, she protested weakly. Try? Derek opened the refrigerator and began listing its contents. Cheese, cookies, ice cream, chocolate. You call that trying? These are just normal foods. Normal for whom? For people who can't control themselves? Derek slammed the refrigerator door shut. Do you know what a client said to me today when I told him about our company's family values? He asked if we care about the health of our families. Martha didn't understand where he was going with this. Can you imagine how I felt? A man whose wife looks like an advertisement for an unhealthy lifestyle talking about family values. Those words were particularly cruel. Martha turned away toward the stove to hide her tears. I'm sorry, she whispered. Derek took another can of beer and returned to the living room, leaving his wife alone in the kitchen. Martha continued cooking, but she had lost her appetite. Her husband's words echoed in her head. When dinner was ready, she set the table and called Derek. He ate in silence, occasionally glancing at her with disapproval. Martha ate very little, but every bite was difficult. After dinner, while Derek watched TV, Martha cleaned up the kitchen. She put the leftover chicken in the refrigerator, but ate a small piece while standing at the sink. The food eased the pain of the evening's conversation a little. Before going to bed, she quietly ate a few cookies with milk. The sweet taste helped her relax and forget the unpleasant words. It was her little secret, an evening ritual that helped her end a difficult day on a positive note. As she fell asleep, Martha thought that tomorrow would be better. Derek would calm down, find new clients, and she would try to be more attentive to his needs. Maybe she really should eat less at work so as not to upset her husband. Friday promised to be a quiet day. Martha woke up before the alarm clock and carefully got out of bed, trying not to wake Derek. He had become even more irritable in recent days. Several potential clients had gone to competitors, and this had greatly hurt his pride. In the kitchen, she quietly made coffee and ate yogurt with muesli. Breakfast in silence, without her husband's morning complaints, seemed like a luxury. Through the window, she saw Jessica leaving the house in her sportswear, apparently going for a morning run. Their eyes met, and Jessica waved. Martha waved back uncertainly, but immediately turned away. Lately, interacting with her neighbor had made her uncomfortable. Jessica asked too many questions about her life and family. At the supermarket, the day began as usual. Tom greeted all the employees and reminded them about the upcoming inventory next week. Martha took her place at checkout number 3 and turned on the machine. The first customers were regulars, retirees who came for fresh produce every Friday. Martha served them with her usual smile, asking about their health and families. Between customers, she slowly ate a banana she had bought on her way to work. Around 11 in the morning, a young mother with 2 small children approached her checkout. The children were acting up and asking for candy, and the woman looked tired and irritated. "Mommy, Mommy, I want chocolate," whined the 5-year-old boy. "I already said no," replied the mother, placing the groceries on the conveyor belt. Martha smiled sympathetically at her and discreetly gave the children a lollipop from the basket next to the cash register. "Thank you," the woman whispered gratefully. "You are very kind." Moments like these warmed Martha's heart. She loved her job precisely because it gave her the opportunity to help people, even in small ways. During her lunch break, Martha decided to walk to a small cafe called Molly's, which was 3 blocks away from the supermarket. This place had become her secret refuge. They served the most delicious burgers in town, and the owner, an elderly woman named Molly, always greeted her regular customers with warmth. "Hello, dear," Molly smiled when Martha entered. "The usual?" Martha nodded. Her usual was a special burger with double cheese, bacon, and Molly's signature sauce. It came with crispy potato wedges and a vanilla milkshake. It was her weekly treat, a little celebration in the middle of her routine weekdays. Molly never commented on her food choices or looked judgmental, unlike Derek. Here, Martha could simply enjoy the taste without thinking about calories or other people's opinions. "How are things at home?" Molly asked as she served the order. "Everything's fine," Martha replied automatically, taking a bite of her burger. The juicy beef, melted cheese, and crispy bacon created the perfect combination of flavors. Every bite was a pleasure and temporarily erased all her worries. "Is your husband still selling cars?" Molly continued the conversation. "Yes, he's very busy," Martha replied between bites. She didn't want to talk about how Derek had recently become even more critical of her appearance and habits. It was her problem, and she had to solve it herself. After lunch, Martha returned to work in a great mood. Delicious food always helped her feel better and cope with life's difficulties. She saw nothing wrong with that. Everyone has their own ways of relaxing. The second half of the day passed quietly. By the end of her shift, Martha felt a little tired, but she was satisfied with the work she had done. Tom approached her register as she was counting the takings. "Martha, great work today," he praised her. "Mrs. Carter came up to me specifically to thank you for your help with the return." "Thank you, Mr. Baker," she smiled. Tom noticed the empty cookie box next to the register, but didn't say anything. Martha was an exemplary employee, and if she needed to snack during the day to keep her energy up, that was her business. At home, Martha found Derek in the living room with documents spread out on the coffee table. He was studying new offers from the car dealership and planning his strategy for the coming week. "How was your day?" she asked as she walked into the kitchen. "Fine," he muttered without looking up. "Make dinner. I'm hungry." Martha began taking food out of the refrigerator. She planned to make baked pork with vegetables, a hearty dish that Derek liked. While the oven was heating up, she ate a few strawberries, enjoying their sweet taste. Around 7 in the evening, there was a knock at the door. Martha opened it and saw Jessica with a small basket in her hands. "Hi," her neighbor smiled. "I picked too many tomatoes in my garden. Maybe you could use them?" "Thank you. That's very kind," Martha replied, taking the basket. Jessica noticed the appetizing smell coming from the kitchen and the loud sound of the TV coming from the living room. "Is Derek home?" she asked. "Yes, he's busy," Martha replied quickly. Jessica paused at the door. She had wanted to have a heart-to-heart talk with her friend for a long time, but didn't know how to start the conversation. "Martha, I have some free time. Would you like to have some tea?" she suggested. Martha hesitated. On the one hand, she wanted to talk to Jessica, the only close person in her life. On the other hand, Derek didn't like it when neighbors stayed in the house for long. "Today's probably not the best day," she said. "Derek is tired after work." "Then let's go somewhere tomorrow," Jessica insisted. "To the new cafe on Main Street or just for a walk." Martha felt Derek stop rustling through papers in the living room. He was listening to their conversation. "I don't know. We might have plans." Jessica noticed her friend's nervousness and decided to be direct. "Martha, are you okay?" she asked quietly. "You've changed over the last few months. You've become more withdrawn. You avoid socializing." "I'm fine," Martha quickly interrupted. "Just a lot of work and household chores." "It's not work," Jessica insisted. "You look tense, like you're constantly afraid of something." Her neighbor's words were too close to the truth, and Martha felt panic rising. "I'm not afraid of anything," she said louder than she meant to. "I have a wonderful family and job." "Martha, if something's wrong..." "Nothing is wrong," Martha replied sharply. Derek is a wonderful husband. He cares for me and worries about my health. Not everyone can boast such attention. Jessica was surprised by such a defensive reaction. I didn't mean to offend you, she said softly. I'm just worried about you. There's no need to worry, Martha replied, calmer now. Everything is fine with us. At that moment, Derek came out of the living room. He was in his home clothes, but he looked impressive. Good evening, Jessica, he greeted her with cold politeness. Hi, Derek, she replied. Martha is preparing dinner, he said, putting his arm around his wife's shoulders. We wouldn't want the food to burn. The gesture was clear, and Jessica understood that her presence was unwelcome. Of course, sorry to bother you, she said. Martha, if you need me, I'm nearby. After Jessica left, Derek closed the door and looked at his wife. What were you talking about? He asked. Nothing in particular. She brought tomatoes from the garden. Derek walked into the kitchen and noticed that the basket was sitting untouched on the table. What else? Martha felt the tension rising. She suggested we meet tomorrow, but I said we might have plans. You did the right thing. Derek nodded. That teacher is too nosy. She sticks her nose into other people's business. They ate dinner in relative silence. Derek was pensive and looked at his wife critically several times. Martha, he said as she cleared the table, the Johnsons are coming over tomorrow. They want to buy a family car, and I invited them over for dinner to show them our family atmosphere. Martha stopped with the plates in her hands. Tomorrow? What should I cook? Something simple but refined. Johnson earns well, they have high standards. Derek stood up and moved closer to her. And try to look the part. Wear something that makes you look slim. Her husband's words hurt, but Martha nodded. I'll try. One more thing, Derek added. Don't eat too much during dinner. Johnson commented that modern Americans have lost their food culture, set an example of restraint. The next day, Martha spent the whole day preparing for dinner. She bought steaks, fresh vegetables, and expensive wine. After work, she washed up, put on her best black dress, and carefully styled her hair. Johnson turned out to be a middle-aged man with a well-groomed appearance. His wife Carol was an elegant blonde in an expensive suit. What a cozy house, Carol smiled as she entered the living room. You can feel a woman's touch. My wife is an excellent homemaker, Derek said proudly. Martha, show our guests around the house while I open the wine. Martha gave them a tour of the house, talking about the renovations and the furnishings. Carol was polite, but looked at her with obvious appraisal. Over dinner, the conversation turned to work, real estate, and vacation plans. Martha tried to participate in the conversation, but mostly listened and smiled. She ate very little, remembering Derek's instructions. Martha isn't very talkative, Carol remarked when dessert was served. She's shy, Derek replied. She prefers to listen rather than talk. But when Martha reached for a second piece of cheesecake, Derek noticed and looked at her disapprovingly. Honey, maybe that's enough dessert? He said with a smile, but his voice was cold. Martha froze with the fork in her hand. All the guests were looking at her. Derek is watching my figure, she tried to joke, but her cheeks burned with shame. That's right, Carol nodded. Men should take care of their wives. Especially when the wife can't take care of herself, Derek added, still smiling. Martha loves to eat. Sometimes I have to stop her. Johnson laughed awkwardly, while Carol looked at Martha with poorly concealed superiority. Everyone has their weaknesses, Johnson said. Of course, Derek agreed, but it's important to control them. Martha tries, but she doesn't always succeed. Right, dear? Martha felt a lump rise in her throat. Public humiliation was particularly painful. Yes, she whispered. The rest of the evening passed in a tense atmosphere. When the guests left, Derek was pleased. It went well, he said. Johnson is interested in buying. We'll sign the contract tomorrow. Martha silently cleared the table, trying not to cry. "And next time, try to eat even less," Derek added. "Carol noticed that you pay too much attention to food." Monday started off particularly difficult. Derek woke up in a bad mood. The weekend had been unsuccessful, and at the last minute, the client Johnson had changed his mind about buying the car, citing financial difficulties. Derek blamed Martha for the failure of the deal. "If you had behaved normally at that dinner," he grumbled, tying his tie, "Johnson wouldn't have doubted our reliability." Martha silently prepared breakfast, trying not to respond to his provocations. Over the years of their marriage, she had learned that arguments only made the situation worse. "Carol was clearly surprised by your manners," Derek continued. "Educated people notice these things." At work, Martha tried to distract herself from the morning's unpleasantness. Serving customers required attention and politeness, which helped her take her mind off her domestic problems. Between customers, she slowly ate an apple, enjoying its sweet flesh. Tom walked past the cash registers, checking on his employees. He noticed that Martha looked particularly tired, but didn't ask any questions. In his experience working with people, everyone dealt with personal problems in their own way. By lunchtime, Martha's mood had improved slightly. She decided to treat herself to a trip to Molly's cafe. It always lifted her spirits and gave her strength for the rest of the day. "Hello, dear," Molly greeted her warmly when Martha entered the cafe. "How are you?" "Fine," Martha smiled, sitting down at her usual table by the window. "The usual?" Molly asked. Martha nodded. Her special burger with double cheese, bacon, and signature sauce was the only joy that no one could take away from her. Here, in this cozy cafe, she felt free from judgment and criticism. Molly brought her order, a mouth-watering burger with crispy potato wedges and a milkshake. The first bite brought familiar pleasure. Juicy beef, melted cheese, and crispy bacon created the perfect combination of flavors. "This burger is special today," Molly said, sitting down at the table for a moment. "I added a new seasoning to the meat." "It's really delicious," Martha replied, savoring every bite. Time stood still here. No one commented on how much she ate or how she looked. Molly treated her with warmth and respect, which she so desperately lacked at home. After lunch, Martha felt a surge of energy and optimism. Delicious food always helped her cope with life's difficulties and find the strength to carry on. But as the workday drew to a close, her anxiety began to return. She didn't rush home, knowing that Derek was still angry about the deal that had fallen through. On the way, she stopped at Molly's cafe again. "You again?" Molly asked in surprise. "Did something happen?" Martha ordered her favorite burger to go. It was her little secret. Sometimes she would buy a special treat to eat at home in a relaxed atmosphere. Molly's burgers were her personal comfort food on difficult days. "I just wanted to treat myself," she explained. Molly carefully packed the burger in a box and added napkins. "Take care of yourself, dear," she said with motherly concern. At home, Martha carefully placed the box with the burger in the refrigerator behind the juice boxes, where Derek wouldn't notice it. She planned to eat it later when her husband went to bed. It would be her little bit of happiness at the end of a hard day. Derek was sitting in the living room with a beer, watching the news. His face was gloomy, and there was tension in the air. "Where were you?" he asked without turning around. "At work. Then I stopped by the store to get some groceries." "Until 7 in the evening?" Derek glanced at his watch. "Your store closes at 6. Martha felt her pulse quicken. Derek had become too attentive to her movements. "There was a short line at the checkout," she lied. Derek looked at her searchingly, but said nothing. At dinner, he talked about new problems at work. The salon manager was unhappy with the drop in sales and was threatening to cut staff. "If I lose my job because of idiots like Johnson," Derek said, aggressively cutting meat, "it will be your fault too." Martha didn't understand the logic behind this accusation, but she kept quiet. After dinner, Derek went to the garage, where he had a small workshop where he repaired old things and cleaned his hunting rifle. Martha seized the moment and took a box of burgers out of the refrigerator. She opened it on the kitchen table and felt disappointed. The box was empty. Only a few crumbs at the bottom reminded her that her burger had been there. "What are you looking for?" Derek's voice came from behind her. Martha turned around. Her husband was standing in the kitchen doorway with a smug smile. "My burger," she said quietly, showing him the empty box. "Oh, that?" Derek laughed. "I found it in the fridge. Pretty tasty, I must say." Martha couldn't believe what she was hearing. You ate my burger? What? Was it yours?" Derek pretended to be surprised. "How was I supposed to know? I thought you bought it for me. Although, to be honest, I doubt you're capable of such thoughtfulness." Her husband's words hurt, but what upset her even more was that he had eaten the only thing that brought her joy. "It was a special burger," she said, trying to hold back her tears. "From Molly's Cafe." "Special?" Derek laughed even louder. "My God, Martha! Are you seriously upset over a piece of meat in a bun? It's just food!" Martha felt an unfamiliar feeling rising inside her, not just hurt, but real anger. "It was my burger," she repeated louder. "Your burger!" Derek slapped his thigh with laughter. "Listen to yourself. You talk about food as if it were your child or your best friend." He moved closer, his face becoming cruel. "You know what I thought when I ate your special burger? That you eat like a pig. Every day, every hour, all you think about is food. You eat at work, you eat at home, you hide food in the fridge like a junkie hides a stash." Each word was like a blow. Martha felt something break inside her. "I have no other joys," she whispered. "Other joys?" Derek grabbed her by the shoulders. "What about me then? What about our home? What about your job? Nothing is enough for you, you have to eat non-stop." "Let me go," Martha said, trying to break free. "No, let's talk this through." Derek squeezed her shoulders tighter. "You've turned into a fat cow who only thinks about food. Look at yourself. You're disgusting." Something snapped in Martha's head. Years of humiliation, insults, and psychological terror suddenly concentrated into a single point of rage. "Enough!" she screamed so loudly that Derek let go of her in surprise. Martha ran out of the kitchen into the living room, where Derek's hunting rifle was kept in a glass display case in the corner. She threw open the door and grabbed the gun. "Martha, what are you doing?" Derek followed her, but his voice was no longer so confident. She turned to him with the rifle in her hands. Her face was contorted with rage, and her eyes were burning. "You ate my burger," she said in a strangely calm voice. "Put the gun down," Derek ordered, but there was a note of fear in his voice. "This is stupid." "Stupid?" Martha raised the weapon. "Is it stupid that I've put up with your insults for 20 years? Is it stupid that the only joy in my life is a burger once a week? Martha, calm down." "No," she screamed. "I won't calm down. You took everything from me. My friends, my self-confidence, my happiness, and now my burger." Derek took a step toward her, but Martha raised the gun higher. "Don't come any closer." "Give me the gun, Martha. You don't know how to use it." "Will you teach me?" A terrifying smile appeared on her face. "Like you taught me to be a nobody?" The shot rang out deafeningly. Derek fell to the floor, blood gushing from the wound in his head. Martha stood with the smoking gun in her hands, staring at her husband's motionless body. The gun fell from her hands and crashed to the floor. Martha sank down onto the sofa, unable to look away from what had happened. "What have I done?" she whispered. Time seemed to stand still. The house was deathly quiet, interrupted only by the ticking of the wall clock. Martha sat and stared at her husband's body, unable to comprehend how it had come to this. After a while, she mechanically picked up the phone and dialed 911. "Emergency services. How can I help you?" "I killed my husband," Martha said in a monotone voice. "I'm sorry. What did you say?" "I shot my husband. Please come." She gave the address and hung up. The police arrived 10 minutes later. 2 patrol officers entered first, followed by Detective Sarah Martinez. She was 38 years old and specialized in domestic crimes. Martha was still sitting on the couch, staring at Derek's body. She had not attempted to flee or hide any evidence. "Ma'am, did you call the police?" one of the officers asked. Martha nodded without turning her head. Detective Martinez surveyed the scene. The gun lay on the floor, the man's body in the center of the living room. An empty burger box sat on the kitchen table. "What's your name?" the detective asked quietly, sitting down next to Martha. "Martha Coleman." "Is this your husband?" "Derek." Martha's voice was empty, mechanical. "Martha, can you tell me what happened?" Martha slowly turned her head toward the detective. Her eyes were red but dry. "He ate my burger," she said. Detective Martinez was an experienced investigator, but this was the first time she had heard such a motive. "Your burger?" "A special burger, from Molly's Cafe. It was all I had." Martha fell silent and stared at her husband's body again. "Martha, we need to go to the station," Detective Martinez said gently. "Do you understand your rights?" Martha nodded, but it was clear that she was in a state of deep shock. Detective Sarah Martinez spent the first day after the murder gathering information about the Coleman family. In her 15 years on the force, she had seen many cases of domestic violence, but the story of the burger required further investigation. Martha was in a holding cell and refused to speak to a lawyer. She sat on the cot, staring at the wall, and answered questions in monosyllables. The prison psychologist diagnosed her with acute stress disorder. Martinez began her investigation by interviewing neighbors on Maple Street. Jessica Harris was the first to agree to give a detailed statement. The teacher met the detective in her neat house, where everything spoke of the measured life of a single woman. On the coffee table lay notebooks with corrected work, and violets bloomed on the windowsill. Jessica talked about how Martha had gradually distanced herself from her over the past 2 years. They used to talk often, drink coffee together, and Martha would share her plans and experiences. But over time, her neighbor became withdrawn, avoided long conversations, and always looked back at the house when they met in the yard. "She changed physically," Jessica explained, nervously fiddling with a napkin. "She gained weight, started slouching, as if she wanted to become invisible. And most importantly, the sparkle in her eyes disappeared. Martha used to be lively, interested in people." The detective wrote down every detail. Jessica recalled several occasions when she had heard loud voices coming from the Coleman house, but it was always just Derek. Martha never shouted back. "The last time I tried to talk to her was 3 days ago," Jessica continued. "I asked if everything was okay. Martha reacted very sharply, defending her husband and saying that he cared about her." Martinez understood this reaction. Victims of domestic violence often defended their abusers, especially when the abuse was psychological rather than physical. The next witness was Tom Baker, the supermarket manager. The 55-year-old man received the detective in his office after working hours. On the walls hung certificates for achievements in trade and photographs from corporate events. Tom talked about Martha's work habits. She was an exemplary employee, never late, polite to customers and colleagues. But he noticed that she was constantly eating something during her shift: fruit, cookies, nuts, small portions of various foods. "At first, I thought she had a sugar problem," Tom explained. "Some people need to eat frequently to maintain their glucose levels. But then I realized it was more of a nervous habit." He recalled how Martha ate especially actively on days when she looked upset or tired. Food clearly helped her cope with stress and stay productive. "She never complained about problems at home," Tom added. "But in recent months, she became more withdrawn. She used to join in the conversation at dinner, but then she started eating alone." Detective Martinez also interviewed other neighbors. Elderly Mrs. Johnson, a regular customer at the supermarket, said she had always found Martha to be a kind and responsive girl. But she noticed how she had changed in recent years. She had become quieter, sadder, as if something was constantly weighing on her. Mr. Thompson, who worked in an office across the street from the supermarket, confirmed Derek's statement that he had often seen Martha eating snacks at work. But he also said that he had witnessed Derek publicly criticizing his wife on the street several times, making comments about her appearance. The next step was a visit to Molly's cafe. The elderly owner of the establishment greeted the detective with caution, but agreed to talk about her regular customer. Molly described Martha as a quiet, polite woman who came to her about once a week. She always ordered the same burger and sat at a table by the window, slowly enjoying her meal. She ate as if it were the last meal of her life, Molly said, wiping her hands on her apron. She savored every bite, closing her eyes with pleasure. I've seen many lonely people in my cafe, but Martha was special. Food clearly meant more to her than just sustenance. The cafe owner also recalled that on the day of the murder, Martha came twice, during her lunch break and again in the evening. The second time, she ordered a burger to go, which was rare. Having gathered enough information, Detective Martinez returned to Martha for a second interview. The woman was still in a depressed state, but was more receptive to conversation. Martinez gently began to tell her what she had learned from neighbors and colleagues. She talked about the patterns of behavior characteristic of victims of psychological abuse, about how gradual isolation and constant criticism destroy a person's self-esteem. Gradually, Martha began to realize what had been happening to her for years. She remembered how Derek forbade her to see her friends, criticized her every choice, and made her feel inadequate. He said he cared about me, Martha whispered during one of their conversations, that he wanted me to be better. The detective explained the difference between caring and controlling, between constructive criticism and systematic humiliation. Martha listened, and understanding gradually dawned in her eyes. The process of realization was painful. Martha understood that she had spent 20 years of her life in a relationship that was destroying her as a person. Food became the only way to cope with the constant stress and emotional pressure. A week after the murder, Martha fully confessed to what she had done. She recounted in detail the events of that evening, how the burger she had eaten was the last straw in a series of humiliations and insults. The court-appointed lawyer prepared a defense based on mitigating circumstances, prolonged psychological abuse, and an emotional state at the time of the crime. The trial took place in a small courtroom in the Springfield County Courthouse. Jessica Harris, Tom Baker, and other witnesses testified about the nature of the relationships within the Coleman family. The prosecutor insisted that the murder was premeditated, while the defense argued that Martha acted in a state of affect after years of psychological terror. Martha remained calm during the trial. She did not try to justify herself or shift the blame onto someone else. She simply stated the facts and answered questions honestly. The judge took mitigating circumstances into account, but emphasized the seriousness of the crime. Martha was sentenced to 8 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 5 years. In prison, Martha began working with a psychologist, studying patterns of codependency and ways to express emotions in a healthy way. She also joined a support group for victims of domestic violence, where she helped other women recognize the signs of psychological terror. Martha Coleman's story serves as a reminder that domestic violence does not always leave visible marks. Psychological terror destroys a person's personality gradually, unnoticed by those around them, but no less destructively than physical aggression.